Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Jeremy again, back with another video. Today, we're going to talk about how to capitalize a string in Python. And as always, I have several different ways you can do it. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So, as I mentioned in pretty much all these videos, it's helpful to start out with a little bit of a problem description. It might seem obvious what I mean when I'm saying capitalize a string, but it's not always clear. For example, if I have a sentence, does that mean capitalize every first letter of every word in the sentence, or does it mean just capitalize the first letter of the whole string? Now, if you've seen the capitalized function in Python, which we'll talk about a little bit later, it capitalized just the first letter of the string. For the purposes of this video, we will just be trying to implement the same sort of functionality. So for example, if we have some string, I'm just going to call it my string, we want ultimately that string to look like this. And again, you can ignore this error. Hopefully I'll have it solved in one of the videos soon. There's a second set of assumptions we need to make, and that is what characters can be capitalized. And for simplicity, we're just going to restrict ourselves to the 26 letters from the English alphabet. So A through Z, lowercase and uppercase. And actually, if you've seen the article, here's what I'm talking about. Here's what our lowercase string would look like, and our uppercase string. If there are any other characters you're concerned about, we will just ignore them for the purposes of this article. Strings get very complicated very quickly, so I like to try to set bounds on what we're doing so we don't get too stuck in the mud. Okay, so now that we've had a chance to actually talk about what does capitalization even mean, I have four solutions for us, and as always, the first solution is sort of handmade. In other words, given what you know about strings, can you perform this capitalization sort of by hand? Can you figure it out without actually relying on any of the code that's available? One thing that I think is worth knowing is that characters correspond to numbers. So for example, we head over here and we write ord, that is a function that's built right into Python, and you can read what it does, returns the Unicode code point for a one character string. So I can pass the letter A, and it's going to return the Unicode code point, which is 97. And interestingly, what you'll notice is that all of the lowercase characters are right next to each other. So B is 98 all the way to Z. And the uppercase letters function very similarly. So if I go ahead and do ord capital A, you'll have 65. If I go ahead and give you ord capital Z, ignoring the error again, we have 90. So you can see the range for these values is the 26 letters from 65 to 90 for uppercase, or 97 to 122 for lowercase. So then the question is, if I know what this number is, how do I get that number back into a character? Well, fortunately, there's like a complementary function called chr, and we can see what that does. It returns a string given an ordinal. So I can put in 97, and you're going to get A. Now, one thing we can do is, since we know that the range is 97 to 122, we can do something like, well, given some character, given some character, if that character, in this case, let's pick C, if it's in this range, then we know it's a lowercase character. So right off the bat, we can do this test and say, hey, we have a lowercase character. And then once we know we have a lowercase character, it's just a matter of converting it to uppercase. So I won't go into all the details about how this function is generated, but basically, once we know we have a lowercase letter, then we can shift that character into the new character space. And for what it's worth, that character space is 32 code points away, if that's the right phrasing. Basically, it's just going to shift all of the uppercase values to lowercase. So what you can do, for example, is if we do something like care of, well, we know lowercase a is 97, we subtract 32 from it, we get capital A. So we can take every single code point that we get that's lowercase, subtract 32 from it, call chr, and get a capital letter form of it. If you look into the article, you'll probably see what this code looks like, but basically it's an if statement, a shift, and then we're going to produce the result and return that value. And then you're able to generate your whole string, basically character by character. So you just grab the first character, you uppercase it, and then you move on. For those who are interested, here's what that solution looks like. Now, I don't recommend writing your own version to do this, but this just gives you a greater idea of what basically is going on under the hood. So if you're interested in maybe how strings work, or you want to see like the process of how you might try to do this by hand, or maybe you're used to using like lower level languages, then you probably have seen something like this before. But of course, we're working in Python, so there are easier ways. So you remember those lowercase and uppercase strings from earlier? I'll go ahead and drop them in. We have a lowercase string, and this contains all the letters of the alphabet in lowercase, and we have the uppercase string with all the letters from uppercase. Why do all the math from the previous solution when we can just map between these two sets? And the way we do that is we can do something like, well, if A is in lowercase, then do something. And this tells us whether or not we have a character that's in lowercase. So before we checked if the ordinal value was within some range, now we just check, is A in the lowercase set? If it is, then we just map that index to the same index of the new set. So basically, once we know we have a lowercase letter, we can do something like lowercase dot, and the function we're looking for is index, and we can pass that letter, and that will give us the index of the letter A in our lowercase set. Of course, that 0 is the first letter, and then we can use that 0 to pull the uppercase value, and we do that like this. And that gives us the uppercase letter. So there's a conversion that can happen here where we get this index and we're able to do some fun things with it. For the sake of time, again, I'll just show you what that solution ends up looking like. And that's what you end up with. We have our two strings. We go ahead and pull the first character from the string. We go ahead, and I didn't show this before, but there's another similar function called find. That'll give us the character we need. And then I have this sort of messy ternary in the bottom that generates our new string if we needed a new capital. Otherwise, we just return the original string. And again, there are definitely better solutions than this, but I just want to show you another way that you could roll this yourself. So at this point, we start moving into the ways that Python provides sort of the capitalized utility for us. And one of those ways is with the upper method. So if you've ever seen something like this, we use the word cow and we call .upper on it, then we're going to get cow fully capitalized. Now, this isn't exactly what we want, right? We don't want all of the letters capitalized. We just want the first letter capitalized. So we have to do something a little bit clever. So we'll go ahead and do something like my string equals cow. And then we'll say my string, my string equals my string, I'm having a heck of a time here. My string at 0 dot upper plus my string. And then we'll just grab the rest of the string. And now my string is just capital C, ow. Now this solution is obviously a lot better, right? Because it's only a couple of lines of code and we don't have to write conditions. We don't have to deal with the messiness. We can just grab the first character, uppercase it, and then append the whole rest of the string with a slice. But trust me, there's an easier way. And of course, before I move on, I'll show you what that solution looks like. And with all that work leading up to this point, I'm just going to show you the most straightforward solution that sort of solves all our problems for us, and it is the capitalize method. So we'll go ahead and use our cow example, and we'll go ahead and call capitalize. And actually, you'll see it already start to populate here. No description, which is a little odd, but regardless, what you'll see is capital C. So if you need to capitalize the first letter of a word, capitalize will do that. And in fact, capitalize is going to function pretty much the same way that we want our capitalization function to work. So we can put something in like hello world dot capitalize, and we're only going to see the first letter capitalize. With that, let's move on to performance. Now, at this point, I want to talk a little bit about performance. And in fact, if you've seen this article, you've probably already seen how I typically do performance. I just run the timeit library, and I usually just create functions like we did with our capitalization functions, and we just run them, on the same data sets to try to get a time value for it. I still do that, but if you head over to GitHub, I actually started building up a test bench for this so we can visualize the results. And so what you're going to see here is on the left side, that's the actual test bench. I don't really need to show you that code, but it just gives you an idea of what's being executed. On the right side, I actually have an old testing file that I'm going to repurpose for capitalization. So let's go ahead and do that now. So first things first, let's go ahead and change all these function names so that they mean something to us. So we have 4 solutions. We can go ahead and delete 2 of these. And then we're going to rename all these functions. So instead of empty list by hand, we'll go ahead and take a crack at this and call this capitalize by hand. And then the second one, what did I call it? I'm going to call it capitalize by mapping. And then we have capitalize by with upper. And finally, capitalize just straight up. Let's just call it that. Now I'm going to save you the time, and I'm just going to plug in all the code from before right into here so you don't have to worry about it. And we'll do some editing magic, so that's interesting to watch. Okay, so now all those functions are plugged in. I actually created a control function. It had some stuff in it before. I'm just going to leave it empty so we can see what happens if we just run a function that does nothing. And then we'll go ahead and update the test bench stuff from down below. So we'll go ahead and change all the names here as well. And then we need to generate some tests. So we'll go ahead and do something like empty string, 1 letter string, small string, and large string. Surely we could also test some other edge cases, like what if the first character is already capitalized? I'm not going to bother with that. I find it way more interesting to see how these perform as the strings get longer. So we'll go ahead and do that. Empty. Cool. So now when we run this, we should be able to get our results in a nice pretty graph. And as usual, this takes a little bit of time because we're going to have to run this in a lot of strings. And that time we failed because string index was out of range. We didn't actually put any protection in any of these. We assumed that the strings would be at least a single letter. So we'll go ahead and delete that test for now. Okay, and actually, if you want to see it run, here's what that looks like. Ah, there we go. Okay. It seems like there's not a lot of growth basically over time. So for example, our 1 string, everything's pretty much running all the same, though it looks like capitalized might run maybe twice as fast as some of the other solutions. When we get to our small string solution, they're all running about the same. Maybe capitalized by mapping's the slowest, and capitalizing with upper's the fastest. But what I do see is that capitalize on a long string takes a very long time. Um, and I'm not really sure why that is because I assumed capitalize would just pull the first character. I'll be interested to see maybe what's going on under the hood there, and I'll get back to you. But for now, this is what you're dealing with. So if you have a really long string, maybe using capitalize isn't the right idea. So at this point, I think it's worth talking about the challenge. And in fact, the challenge today isn't that much different than what we did throughout this entire article. All I'm asking you to do is replicate the capitalize function of Python. And in fact, I probably seemed a bit perplexed looking at capitalize because I assumed if we were just going to capitalize the first letter, well, there would be no issues, right? We could just grab the first letter and capitalize it, but that's not actually what the capitalized documentation says. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the article over. And what you'll see here is from the Python docs, it says it returns a copy of the string with its first character capitalized and the rest lowercase, which means that it doesn't run in constant time. We have to actually lowercase all the remaining letters. So what does that mean for you? Well, see if you can write a function that does that. As always, I've posted one on Python under the Renegade Python hashtag, and you can see what that solution looks like. I grab the first character, I uppercase it. I grab the remaining string, and I lowercase it. But you might have some better ideas. Maybe you want to use some of the original solutions that we talked about, but it's totally up to you. So go ahead, and hopefully I see you over there on Twitter. With all that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, special thanks to all my patrons who support all my work. If you'd like to join in on that, the link is below in the description. Also, I always love to feature some anime art in my videos, and so this background today was by Encole36. I'll leave a link to their work in the description as well. Other than that, take care.